felt?
Well, I was actually nervous, but one burning question I had in my mind and was that, how do you and your team in 20 years ago come to the conclusion to define sustainable development? And your response was so inspiring because you said that we were thinking about the future, and that's why we define sustainable development. And I was so happy and honored to hear you speak because in the next couple of months I will be studying sustainable development. So that was my burning question. And I was so happy that you thought about our future and then you come up with that concept of sustainable development. Now I can tell my peers that sustainable development is about the future, it's not about the past.
Thank you, Esther. Now, Pedro, here in Brazil, what is on your mind and your young friends' minds, as you approach and think about burning issues from a Brazilian perspective as you approach Rio?
Well, I'd say that Brazil is going through a very special moment now. We've been having some strong progress. There's many opportunities we have in this country nowadays, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it sustainably. We haven't reached sustainable development yet. And this is right out there now at Rio+20. We have many challenges, and I see that my generation simply doesn't like the way things are going too much. We simply feel, and I don't think this is only Brazil, I think this is also Nigeria, China, Sweden, and all other countries. What I see is that young people demand change. Many people are simply frustrated on the way things are going and moving forward and looking for alternatives. That's how I see it today here.
All right. How did they do? Well, we'll wait till we hear all the questions and then we'll give them a grade. I think that's probably the best thing. Very nice. Mary Robinson, over to you.
I am really enjoying this. For the last 8 weeks, they've been asking us questions, some of them difficult questions. Now it's my turn. Sara, I'll start with you. You've been working in UNEP, so you've gained a lot of inside experience of how the United Nations primarily deals with the environment. If you had all the power in the world, what would you do to make the UN more effective on the environment?
The UN started working on environmental issues 40 years ago in Stockholm in Sweden. And I know that my king, who is here today, was there. But I was not there because I was not born yet. But since then, the UN has been working on environmental issues. And that's great. And they have created a very complex system with overlap and fragmentation and lack of resources. There are 500 multilateral environmental agreements that focus on different environmental issues. And it's simply not working because at the same time, the environmental situation in the world has declined. So we really need to do something to bring greater coherence to this system. And I think that the environmental pillar needs to be much stronger in the UN system so that it can work together with the social and environmental pillars on the same level and same power to bring sustainable development to the world. And I think it's crucial that young people and civil society are seen as natural allies to the UN to help make this change happen.
Thank you, Sara. I hope those delegates in the Rio Centro are listening to you because I think you are spot on. Marvin, you come from the largest country in the world, and I know you're very connected with a lot of young people in China, a lot of young people around the world. About how many people, do you communicate with? And what is your idea of what would be a success of Rio? What would you feel is top of your agenda for the Rio conference?
In China, we have like very different system for social media. We have like a separate version of Twitter and Facebook in China. We have Weibo, Xinjiang Weibo, and Renren Wang. And there I have like about overall 8,000 followers there. And also I'm managing my organization's accounts, so maybe like 10,000 overall. And for me, as I'm from China, a country with 80 million Communist Party members, I think the top of my agenda will be equity. Equity is a very fascinating idea of the whole history, maybe. So I would like to see our world to be more fair and more equitable. Here I see that at Rio Central, somehow we have kindly secured the CBDR, which is the common but differentiated responsibilities principle. But I also want to see more fair and equitable gender regional equity, and lots of this kind of concepts to be inserted to the final text. And I think regarding to the social media, I think it's quite important for us to use this tool to start the dialogue and listen to each other, listen to each other's opinion and ideas. It will be the first step to get the consensus at our society on web, online, offline, and also here at the Rio+Social at the international negotiations.
So how do we think they did? I don't know. If the elders were asking me a question unrehearsed in front of hundreds of thousands of people, I would be pretty nervous. How do you think they did? Come on, let's give them a hand. I think that was pretty good. Now, I haven't asked the elders yet, and we'll find out, I think, later on as we continue this debate and the conversation. So social media is going crazy with questions for this group, because this is not a typical living room to have this many different people from this many different countries representing so many different perspectives. And so let's get into some of the questions that we're hearing, specifically blending a couple of questions right now from Twitter. Are you ready? Because we're going to get this conversation going with this group. I love this question right now that's come in, and this is from @SanReinmore, and he says, I'm a young person. How is it that I inspire the older generation to take sustainability seriously? And this is something that we've seen come in. This is one question that represents many questions. Young people who are interested in sustainable development, how do you get the older generation to take it seriously? They're not saying governments, they're saying the older generation. So I think this is an interesting question for all of you. And what I'd like to do is we're going to go in a bit of a, we're going to leapfrog a little bit if we can. So I'm actually going to start from here, and we're going to go in this direction, and we'll change the order up a little bit. So yeah, what would you do as a young person to inspire the older generation to take sustainability seriously?
From my experiences at China, I would say 2 points very basically. First is get the older generation online. Get them use Sina Weibo and Twitter and Facebook maybe. It's first very important so they can access to the information. The second thing that we need to provide the visible things, the truth happening at grassroots, happening at our social society, to let them know, make it visible and very vivid to the older generation. Then they can be aware of this problem. Then they will start to take actions.
I have learned a lot of sustainable practices from my grandmother, actually, because when she was young, people in Sweden took care about their belongings much more and repaired clothes that were broken and things like that. So I learned to do that from her. But she was not doing it because she cared about sustainable development, but because that was what everybody did at that time. And now, when I learn the skills from her how to repair my things, then I talk to her about environmental issues, and she understands why I do it. And I think that young people have a lot of energy and passion to drive change, and we need to share this with the older generation to inspire them to also create change.
I think because we're in such a transformative time, it's a time when so much is changing and the problems are very acute, including the climate change issue, that we need the voices of young people to be actually at the tables. Some attempt has been made, and I honour that, by Brazil in the sustainability panels, etc. But even so, they're not there at the real tables, and the age group at the real tables is not so young. That said, I must say, I do think that in an interesting way, women tend to be very intergenerational, because we have a more nurturing tendency. I know when my first grandchild was born, I had a kind of physical reaction to that. That's all I can say. And I do have a perspective of about 100 years, because my 4 grandchildren, I now have 4, will be in their 40s in 2050, and they will share the world with at least 9 billion others. And I just care about that deeply, because it's relevant to me. Maybe if we made the older generation see more that they have to nurture the future and the earth for the future, and that's the sustainable development. That's what GRU was telling us 25 years ago.
Can you repeat for us again your 4 grandchildren? Give us that statistic again.
They'll be in their 40s in 2050, and they will share the world with at least 9 billion others. That's what we're being told. And that really, and I care about all those, not just narrowly my grandchildren, obviously. It's just, it does give you that perspective. Whereas most politicians are thinking 6 months or the next election. The horizon is far too short. And young people have a different horizon. It's their future. And they should be more in the decision making.
Thank you. I could hear in the room, in everyone's head, people doing similar math. I started doing the math about my kids, and so I wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to redo that mathematics as we're talking about development. Pedro, what do you think?
Well, I think that many times people from older generations and even from our generation see sustainable development as restriction. What we gotta show is that actually that's the way out of the crisis we have, and actually living sustainably is better for all of us. If we can send this message to everyone, if we can phrase sustainable development as not a luxury or not something that's a problem, but actually as the way out of our crisis, then I guess more people will be on the boat with us.
You know, the person who asked this question on Twitter, I mean, I was thinking, how can you inspire older people like me? Well, you know, in my mind, young people are the ones who are going to take over the management of our lives and their lives and our grandchildren's lives. So it is so important when you realize that young people are thinking beyond their individual situation, their individual resources, and thinking more broadly on society and in the wider world. To me, any young people who thinks beyond him or herself and thinks about the future and are kind of getting ready to take charge